signed as part of a comprehensive immigration reform proposal, which we know is very complicated and difficult to get both sides to agree on. Let's change speeds a little bit and talk about Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer's latest push to try and legalize marijuana on a federal level. On Wednesday, he introduced a draft of the legislation. Grace, go ahead and break down his proposal for us. And we understand it's a long shot proposal. What is he expecting or hoping might happen as a result of him introducing this legislation?
Even though this is definitely a long shot proposal, again, because it would be unlikely to garner sufficient Republican support, it's also a massive step forward in showing the popularity of marijuana decriminalization on a federal level. So what this bill would do would remove marijuana from the Controlled Substances Act, decriminalize it on a federal level such that even though states could make their own laws related to marijuana, now individuals and businesses who want to sell and consume marijuana or cannabis products would not be prosecuted on a federal level. So it does that, decriminalizing. It also attempts to kind of make up for the harms done by the war on drugs, particularly on poor communities of color. So by expunging previous marijuana arrests from the federal record. And that is sort of an attempt to make reparations to these communities who have been particularly affected by it. But unfortunately, for supporters of the bill and for Schumer, this is really not likely to go anywhere in the Senate, at least in this session of Congress, again, because Democrats only hold 50 seats, 60 votes are needed to advance legislation. Without those extra 10 Republican votes, there just simply isn't a way that it would be able to pass.
So, Grace, there's a lot of topics that are currently swirling around Congress. We mentioned infrastructure and DACA both being on the table. There's the Biden administration's push for human infrastructure and all that's involved in that. There's push for climate change and climate change legislation. There's this discussion about marijuana. And with all of this happening, obviously, Republicans and Democrats are starting already to look at the midterm elections. So what is Congress's top priority from the perspective of the leaders of both parties?
So the top priority is probably going to be infrastructure right now. As you mentioned, we have the bipartisan infrastructure package, which is smaller and focused on surface transportation, like highways, roads, bridges, expansion of broadband, and some climate change-related provisions. And that is currently being written and negotiated by a bipartisan group of senators. They're still ironing out the kinks, figuring out what exactly they want to be the pay-fors to fund this bill. So you have that going on. And meanwhile, you also have this reconciliation bill with those human infrastructure priorities. And Congress has a limited amount of time before the August recess. They are going to be going home for several weeks in the month of August, meaning that they have a limited amount of time to get some of this done. And Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has said that he wants to start voting on both infrastructure proposals as early as next week. So you can expect those to be the big priorities in the immediate coming weeks. They may even push back the August recess a little bit in order to deal with it. After the August recess, probably the biggest point of order is going to be funding the government, because we're getting into fall. That's when a lot of these deadlines are due for government funding. And honestly, that's probably going to consume other considerations that are equally important, because that is just going to be a necessity in order to accomplish.
All right, Grace, thanks for joining us from Washington and filling us in.
Thank you.
The Biden administration is facing two crises in the Caribbean. Political turmoil is escalating in both Cuba and Haiti. Mass anti-government protests are underway across Cuba, while the Haitian government is struggling to rebound following the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse. CBS News correspondent Christina Ruffini has more on a possible U.S. response.
Days of anti-government protests followed by government crackdowns and arrests across Cuba have led to the inevitable question. What, if anything, is the U.S. going to do about it?
At this point, it's basic human rights.
Quarantine lockdowns, food and medical shortages, and a spike in COVID cases have prompted widespread outcry. Cuban Americans are urging the White House to take action.
I have a lot of family still left in Cuba, and a lot of family that still haven't heard from.
There are a number of things that we would consider doing to help the people of Cuba.
The administration has not signaled it's ready to relax the trade embargo, which the Cuban government blames for the country's economic hardship. And even allowing Americans to wire money back to their families in Cuba, known as remittances, comes with complications.
I would not do that now because the fact is it's highly likely that the regime would confiscate those remittances or big chunks of it.
Meanwhile, in Haiti, an estimated quarter of the nation's economy comes from those remittances. The government's request for American troops to help stabilize the country after the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse has been denied. It's still not clear who ordered the attack or why, nor is it clear exactly who is supposed to be running the country. On Friday, hundreds of supporters gathered to greet former Haitian President Jean-Bertrand Aristide as he returned from seeking medical treatment in Cuba. Ousted in a coup in 2004, Aristide is a popular but polarizing figure and a potentially volatile addition to the political powder keg in Port-au-Prince. Now, the U.S. has sent a team of State Department advisors as well as federal agents to aid Haiti in that investigation. We also asked the White House if, in addition to Cuba, it considers Haiti or any other countries to be failed states. We did not hear back. Lana?
Christina, thank you. And a reminder, you can stream Face the Nation every Sunday. It airs at 10:30 a.m. Eastern on CBS and later at 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. right here on CBS. Coronavirus infections have increased in all 50 states for the first time since January. Now, some fear that the U.S. could be entering a fourth wave of COVID-19. In some places, safety mandates that were eased just last month are now being reinstated. CBS News' Michael George has more on the fight against the quick-spreading Delta variant.
Southern California's Orange County Fair kicked off with rides, food, fun, and crowds limited to 75% of normal capacity amid the pandemic. Just to the north, Los Angeles County mandate requiring vaccinated and unvaccinated people to mask up indoors takes effect this weekend. But saying it's not backed by science, LA County Sheriff Alex Baldwin tweeted that his department doesn't have the resources to enforce the mandate.
Originally, I thought, oh my gosh, here it is again. I have to put this thing on her face for a little bit longer, but if it saves one more life, then I guess it's worth it.
California, several Bay Area counties have also issued new mask recommendations. Every state in the nation reports rising COVID-19 case numbers, a disturbing pattern fueled largely by the more contagious Delta variant.
The vaccines are still very effective in preventing severe disease. We've got to get people vaccinated. These are life-saving interventions.
And two people familiar with the situation tell CBS News that 3 vaccinated members of the Texas House Democratic Caucus that traveled in protest to Washington, D.C. last week have tested positive for COVID-19 with rapid tests. The Texas lawmakers came to the nation's capital in hopes of blocking the Republican-backed voting rights bill in the state legislature. Michael George, CBS News.
Officials say a massive wildfire in southern Oregon may not be fully extinguished until November. The Woodland Fire has burned more than 200,000 acres. That's roughly the size of New York City and twice the size of Portland. Meteorologists are warning dry and windy conditions in the next few days could fuel the fire even more. The wildfire has destroyed more than 60 homes and caused a wave of evacuations. This comes as millions of Americans in the western half of the country are dealing with the fourth heat wave in 5 weeks. Forecasters say another heat dome is the cause for triple-digit temperatures. Along with wildfires, several states, including California and Arizona, have reported water shortages and ruined crops. Devastating flooding in central Europe has now killed more than 150 people. In Germany, the military assisted in rescue efforts in the western half of the country. They use armored vehicles to move cars and trucks flooded out by the heavy rain. In Belgium, some levees along the Meuse River were at risk of collapsing. Authorities issued an evacuation order for districts bordering the area. CBS News foreign correspondent NTS Tayeb has the latest from London.
As the floodwaters begin to recede, the scale of the disaster is laid bare. Once thriving communities now in ruins after flooding not seen in generations. And amidst all the devastation, a death toll that's only rising with hundreds still missing. There's so many people dead.
You don't expect people to die in a flood in Germany. You expect it maybe in poor countries, but you don't expect it here. But it was all too fast, too quick.
The speed with which large parts of Germany, Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands were submerged has shocked climate scientists. Despite being among the wealthiest nations in Western Europe, their defenses were no match for the deluge after 2 months' worth of rain fell in just 2 days. Germany's president, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, is vowing to do more, saying,
Nur wenn wir den Kampf gegen den
only if we take up the fight against climate change decisively, will we be able to keep extreme weather conditions such as what we're experiencing now in check. In some of the worst affected areas, emergency teams have started the colossal task of clearing the devastated streets of once picturesque towns and villages. Efforts are also underway to restore gas, electricity, and telephone services still cut off for at least 100,000 homes. And as those who live here begin to calculate the cost of what's been lost, what's clear is life won't likely ever be the same.
Now, climate change scientists have been predicting for years that summer rainfall and heat waves would become more intense because of human-induced climate change. But this disaster in Western Europe has surpassed all expectations. Now, the fear now is that if nothing meaningful is done, things are only going to get worse. Well,
Yes, thank you. Coming up after the break, the cost of finding a place to live has skyrocketed as more parts of the nation reopen. We'll explain why renters will likely pay more per month than they did before the pandemic. And England is moving forward with reopening efforts on Monday, even as new cases there surge. The message from the UK Health Secretary, who just announced that he tested positive for COVID-19. This is CBSN. CBS News, always on.
It's time for a change. Oh yeah. I'm talking about new home windows. People have been home, and now it's time to get the things that make life better.
Well, this thing with Freeland is really going to help someone. $25,000 worth of power. Maybe it's a bath. If I end some windows,
I don't know.
Go to BostonOnline.com, watch us, and time for landing someone's dream come true. Sorry, government.
Stop in today to support a motive and aptitude your tractor boat to be your pick of 2022 models.
Angie's List is now Angie, and it's easier than ever to get your projects done right. With Angie, you can connect with top pros and see ratings and reviews. And when you book and pay through Angie, you're covered by our happiness guarantee. Check out Angie.com today. Angie, and done.
Everyone needs a little time to relax. And since Maria switched to Game Fabric software, it's Ella Soft Scenty Bliss. So scenty, so soft. Hey, number 1 scent available in software.
My jaw is less tender right now, and I can take 2 Tylenol in 10 minutes.
Investigators hired by the New York State Attorney General's office are expected to interview Governor Andrew Cuomo on Saturday. Lawyers have been looking into sexual harassment claims made against the governor over the past year. They've already spoken to the accusers and several senior administration officials. They're scrutinizing those accounts and looking into whether the administration broke any laws when responding to the complaints. Governor Cuomo has denied any wrongdoing. The findings are expected to be made public when the investigation is complete. Rent prices are rising well past their pre-pandemic levels in multiple U.S. cities. Realtor.com says the median rent last month is up 8% compared to the same time last year. There are also less homes on the rental market. Experts say that's leading to bidding wars. Rents are at a new high in 44 of the U.S.'s largest markets. CBS News Money Watch reporter Irina Ivanova joins me now for more. Irina, great to have you on. So what areas are seeing the biggest increase in rent, and what's the reason for this rise?
Thanks, Laura. So we're seeing some of the highest increases in the smaller cities that are away from the coast, which is a real reversal of what we've seen in the past decade. If you look at data from Realtor.com, the 10 cities with the biggest increases are places like Riverside and San Bernardino in California, Memphis, Tennessee, Tampa, Phoenix, Sacramento, Cincinnati. These are not the coastal metros that have been seeing very high rent increases before the pandemic. This is really driven by people from those big cities who fled during the pandemic, either for reasons related to COVID or for lifestyle reasons. A lot of those folks are deciding they don't want to move back to the Bay Area or to Los Angeles or to Boston. They want to stay in their smaller city, and that's causing rents to go way, way up.
And what impact is this having on long-term renters?
For a lot of people, it's really jarring, especially if you consider the huge income disparities we have in some parts of the country. I spoke with one woman in the Memphis metro area. So Memphis has had the second highest increase in rents over the past 10 years. Rents are up 23% there. This woman went to a place for $850, and she's seeing places around her houses get bought up and get put on the market for rent for $1,500 a month, and that's far more than she feels she can afford to pay. The median job in that area pays something like $34,000, so she's really concerned that when her lease is up, early next year, that she'll have to move out.
And a decrease in housing inventory, I understand, has also pushed more potential home buyers into renting. Explain how that also interacts with these already complex dynamics.
That is absolutely part of the equation. So we have not been building enough housing over the past decade to keep up with the rate of population growth. Last year, we actually had a really higher building, but there's this huge backlog of people, the millennial generation, many of whom are in their early 30s or are turning 30 this year, which is typically an age where you would stop renting and you would buy a home. A lot of these people now can't buy because we've also seen housing prices go through the roof. If they can't buy, they keep renting, so that adds an additional pressure on the rent prices.
And you mentioned rent in some of the bigger cities remain below their pre-pandemic levels. Tell us what cities are being affected at these lower levels, and do you expect that is going to continue to last much longer as the nation continues to recover?
So that's right. The largest cities, so New York, Los Angeles, Boston, Washington, D.C., Chicago, San Francisco Bay Area, they are, on average, the rents there are a little bit lower than they were a year before. But again, historically, these have been some of the priciest markets in the country, so these rents are down slightly from very, very high levels. The real estate experts don't expect it to last very much longer. One realtor I spoke with in New York City said, you can still get something now for about what you would pay last year, but she expects the good deals to end in a few months. But it's really an open question, and a lot of it depends on whether the people who left these big cities will all come back, or whether some of them will stay where they've been living, in some of these smaller areas. And if that happens, then we can expect rents in these large metros to plateau for a little bit or to rise more slowly than they have been historically.
Marina, I want to get a little bit deeper into rent and the pandemic. Some 11.5 million adults are behind on rent, and Congress, as you know, has approved more than $46 billion in rental assistance. But it's really remarkable that only $1.5 billion went out by the end of May. What's been the issue with getting that money sent out, and are potential renters who need that assistance getting what they need?
It's really stemming, Lana. As you say, there's so many people who are frustrated who say they're not getting the money, even though we have had a very large amount of funding set aside for them. The issue is really one of bureaucracy. So actually, Gene Sperling, the coordinator of the American Rescue Plan, said that summer recently that as a nation, America's never had any infrastructure to prevent eviction. So when this money was appropriated, it went to states, it went to cities, and a lot of them really had to create new programs from scratch to figure out how to get people this money. And states are dealing with a lot of stuff. Local governments might be looking at different priorities. And then when they're creating these programs, they have to figure out, how do we promote them? How do we get people to apply? What kinds of qualifications are we going to ask? How will we ask people to demonstrate their income? It's really a huge undertaking, and bureaucracy has never been a fast process at the best of times. So when you're building an entirely new program from scratch, it can really, really slow down, the process of getting people the money and the help that they need.
Yeah, bureaucracy notorious for being a great big pain, but I'm wondering because, the money not going out doesn't help the renters, it doesn't help the landlords, and it hurts the local economy. So ultimately, what happens if renters don't get that money because of bureaucracy and those slow-moving wheels of government before the federal eviction moratorium expires at the end of this month?
What happens will depend a little on the state. There are some states that have eviction moratoriums ending later than the federal moratorium expires. So for instance, if you live in California, you will be protected from eviction until the end of September. That gives people a little bit more money, a little bit more time to get a crack at getting some of this money and some of this aid. New York and Illinois are similar. Eviction protections there expire at the end of August. A lot of other states, however, the vast majority of states do not have additional eviction protections beyond the CDC moratorium. So what we can expect to see when it runs out, if people haven't got their money, people might be having to negotiate with their, landlord. A lot of landlords, I imagine, will be tired of negotiating, especially if they've been trying to move someone out for several months. We can expect, unfortunately, a lot of people to potentially lose their homes.
Okay, Irina, thank you so much for joining and filling us in on all those details.
Thank you for having me, Lana.
The United States Navy has named a new ship after the late civil rights leader and longtime Congressman John Lewis.
For the United States of America, I christen thee John Lewis. May God bless this ship and all who sail in her.
The USNS John Lewis was christened in San Diego on Saturday, 1 year after the Congressman's death. It's part of a new fleet of replenishment ships. The other vessels in its class will also be named after civil rights leaders. Representative Lewis's activism spanned decades. He first came to prominence after being beaten during the Bloody Sunday March in Selma, Alabama. Later, as a lawmaker, he worked tirelessly to pass civil rights laws. The ship's dedication comes as the Senate is considering two bills to expand voting rights, including the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. Saturday marks 25 years since TWA Flight 800 exploded off the coast of Long Island in New York, killing all 230 people on board. Flight 800 was one of the worst aviation disasters ever experienced. CBS News transportation correspondent Errol Barnett looks back.
He was a Harvard hockey player, and I was a new college graduate.
Heidi Snow Citadel and her fiancé Michelle Griestroff had one last phone call before his trip to Paris aboard TWA Flight 800.
We exchanged our final I love yous, and he told me he'd call me when he got to Paris.
You're about 6,000 feet, I'm going to bump the wreckage.
But when her mother phoned telling her to turn on the television, everything changed.
I saw the TWA 100 debris burning on the dark Atlantic Ocean, and everything we planned together started to shatter.
Minutes after takeoff from JFK at almost 14,000 feet, 230 passengers and crew from 10 countries experienced a mid-air explosion.
The fuel was burning the water, and you couldn't stand the smell of the fumes, and it was burning your eyes.
One of the first reporters on the scene, CBS News senior investigative producer Pat Milton, who at the time was with the Associated Press.
I remember there was one young man, and here he was hauling bodies into the boat, but treating them with such dignity and grace. It was just an incredible experience to see.
There were no survivors. Public outcry was immediate, and suspecting a crime, the FBI launched an exhaustive investigation.
They thought that this was a terrorist act. It captured the world.
Trawlers vacuuming the ocean floor, sifting through sediment for clues. What followed was one of the longest FBI investigations of its time, and one of the longest NTSB probes to this day.
This is where the main explosion initiated. This is the area of interest.
Frank Hildrow, who was among the first NTSB investigators on site, says reconstructing the doomed aircraft, a rare move for the safety board, was essential.
We wanted to be able to view and display the center wing tank to demonstrate where the event occurred and how the spark may have been introduced to it.
It took 16 months for the FBI to rule out terrorism, and more than 4 years and $40 million for the NTSB to conclude the explosion was most likely caused by a short circuit outside of the center wing tank. This changed the way planes were built, specifically how fuel tanks were constructed.
A tragedy has resulted in a number of significant improvements, both in aviation as well as in victim assistance, family assistance.
The wreckage has been off limits to cameras, sitting in this Virginia NTSB facility since 2003. A sacred teaching tool for crash investigators. But with the lease here expiring, this wreckage is being destroyed and won't go to a museum due to family wishes. Its lessons moving online.
Can a virtual environment ever really replace being here in real life?
I think that's the question we're all asking ourselves as we've gone through the pandemic.
Please enter your password.
To reach others, I think, increases significantly by doing it this way.
I'm sorry, that is not the correct password. Please re-enter your password now. If you have entered
Senator, who is now married with children, spent the last 25
You have no
years
messages
running
in your
a
mailbox.
nonprofit called Access. Now one of her daughters is helping other kids.
I have an older daughter who actually has come forward and started to make her own initiative to help children by putting together a project called Comfort Kits for Kids, where she actually puts together grief kits and toys and comforting objects to send to kids who are in grief.
What is the legacy of TWA Flight 100? It's the preciousness of life, the fact that you did have ordinary people doing extraordinary things to not only try to recover victims, but trying to solve what happened to this plane crash. The investigators were driven to find out, and they were driven because of their relationships with the families.
Arnett, Washington.
Hip-hop pioneer Biz Markie has died at age 57.
You got what I need, but you say
The native New Yorker broke into the mainstream music scene with his platinum-selling hit, Just a Friend, in 1989. Markie began his career in 1985 as a beatboxer. He was dubbed the Clown Prince of hip-hop for his lighthearted and comical lyrics and rhymes. He released 5 studio albums and appeared in a number of television shows. He also had a role in the movie Men in Black 2 as a beatboxing alien. Marquie's representatives say that he died Friday with his wife by his side. She added the artist would forever be celebrated by his peers and beloved fans. Still ahead on CBSN, restoring order in South Africa after a week of unrest and violence. We look at what sparked looting in several cities and how frustrations hit a tipping point. You're streaming CBSN.
That's weird. Is it you? What you doing that?
Introducing Michelob Ultra Organic Seltzer. It's 6 times filtered and is USDA certified organic. We're not playing around. New cucumber lime Michelob Ultra Organic Seltzer. As real as it tastes.
Oh, pardon me.
Things you start when you're 45. No gym, new workouts.
No. That was weird enough. There you go. My life was so happy. I was so loved. I think so. It's not bad. Not bad. Oh, shit. Beats me. Hot? No. Hey. Listen. It's good at food. Lots of it. Good hot food. Yeah. She stood up. So I didn't. And they invited me back. About 2 or 3 days. Yeah. I thought it was stupid. A stupid thing. Who cares? I told Donna. Right. I don't know. Shit. Yep. Yeah. What are you waiting for? We're waiting for the bus of catechism. All of it? Mm-hmm. 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 Walnuts. They also have COVID-19. Firm reaffirmed times 4. The power of an infinite number of infinities. It was really good. I guess. He's smart. Smart little guy. Me too, a little. No. I don't know. No. No time. I didn't. Yeah, I guess so. Good.
Power off.
I had a frozen spaghetti meal. Stouffer's. It's pretty good. I have some left. Hold on. I'm looking forward to it. I really am. Man. This is okay.
Organic, wild caught, vegan lip gloss. I discovered this, that, these, and just getting started. New stores, more to discover. Visit Instacart.com or download the app to get free delivery on your first order.
Not for me. Probably. Probably. What's the big deal?
I ask for justice.
Whoa, careful with all that deliciousness. Sekiro, honestly, sir.
Doing it yourself doesn't have to mean all by yourself. With the Home Depot as your partner, doing's never been easier. You can pick up skills in a virtual workshop. Pick up what you need fast or how to deliver same day. And if you have more projects than you have time to do them, you can even help fast.
That's pretty good.
This is doing like never before.
That's pretty good.
This is the Home Depot. Doers get more done.
I need to know when you'll be there. We are family.
I'll be here until we close the book. Gosh, couldn't believe my transitions meeting.
Good luck, Helen. But before you go, a word of caution.
Younger.
These groups, they can be...
No, both will draw, I think.
The room will be full of lonely, vulnerable women like yourself. There are men...
Power on.
to prey on such
Bluetooth pairing.
You never know when
Bluetooth
men
connected.
such as these will crawl out of their homes.
You seem to know an awful lot about this, Antonio.
I drive a cab, I hear things.
Look, I know this is going to be a tough night for you, and I just want to say that if you need somebody there to support you, I'd be willing to go along.
You did that for me?
Yeah, come on, we're friends forever, huh?
Thanks a lot.
Hey, you bet. Oh, and if anyone shows the slightest interest in me, you know each other.
Gotcha.
Well, Harry, it sounds like you've made excellent progress this week. When you're ready, we'd love to have
Is
you
it me? Or is everyone in here kind of old?
Yeah, I think the only chance I have of picking up warm beer is if one falls and can't get up.
May I help? I think we're in the wrong place. We were looking for the transitions group. Oh, that's us. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't expect this. I thought the group would be a little younger.
Yeah, I guess you weren't told that we were a branch of the Nantucket Senior Center.
No, we would be very happy if you stayed, unless you think that people of our age and experience have nothing to offer. He's just mistaken? No. So, we were just hearing from Harry here. Harry was recently widowed, and he's made a major breakthrough in the last week. Would you like to continue, Harry?
Last Saturday night, I went out to dinner all by myself for the first time since my wife died.
Small steps, Harry, small steps.
Yeah, I learned something too.
What's that?
If you cry during dessert, you get your meal free.
So,
very complicated. I really
She just broke up with my brother Joe. She's having a very tough time dealing with it.
Thank you, Brian.
Then maybe we could move on to another member of the group. Let's say Brian here.
Me?
Yes. Oh, all right, Brian. Why don't you tell us about your pain?
Pain? I really don't have any pain. I mean, I only came here to, I don't even know why I came here, really.
Brian, are you saying that you have never been hurt in a relationship?
No, never once.
Oh, come on, Brian.
Never once. What are you talking about? Yeah, okay, fine. Yeah, all right, great. Okay. Carol did leave me, but that marriage was doomed from the beginning. What did I do to that? So,
you don't miss her?
no, not at all. Miss her. Sometimes a little bit around Christmas, but I mean, Christmas has got those feelings around the holidays, all right? And on birthdays, a little bit. Yeah, Carol used to give me the same present every year. The only surprise was where she put the bow. It's 2 days out of the whole year, 2 lousy days. 3 days if you count our anniversary. We used to make dinner for each other. Dinner by candlelight. And then we just sit and stare into each other's eyes. The candles burn out. Still got those candle holders somewhere. God knows why. Hold on to them. I should give them away or throw them out. Oh God, Carol! It's gone!
There!
She's gone!
Let it all out! Let it all out!
Okay, so the question is, what is it about me that would make Carol treat me the way she did? I think the answer can be found if we go deeper into my childhood.
Oh, Brian. May I interrupt you there for a moment? Perhaps we can get back to the other members before our time is up.
Well, why? How long do we have the room?
I wasn't talking about the room. Helen, perhaps we can return to you now. Listen, I'm sure you all mean well, but I just don't feel comfortable talking about this in front of strangers. Oh, well, here's an idea. Why don't we try a little role play? I mean, one of our men here could pretend to be Joe, and the two of you could have a conversation. No, I don't think so, but thank you. Oh, come on, go ahead. I mean, Harry here is very good at this.
Yeah. Last week I was a 90-year-old black lady.
Really don't think so. Oh, I would prefer to come on here. You just try. There we go. Okay? Well, okay.
Hi, Helen.
Hi, Joe. Small steps, Ellen. Small steps. Now, tell Joe what you really think of him. No, I couldn't tell him what I really think of Joe.
Use me. I'm a tool.
Okay. Joe? You shouldn't have treated me the way you did. You lied to me. You tricked me. You let me believe we had a relationship just to think you are. Two-time me with some floozy. I'll tell you who you are. You're a no-good, cheat, liar, pious, self-righteous SOB, and I'd like to bite your head up and spit down your neck.
I don't want to play anymore.
I'm sorry. You've all been very sweet and understanding, but this just isn't working for me. You have been keeping your feelings bottled up inside you, and you've just begun to let them out. Now, if you can't continue here with us, isn't there someone else that you can talk to? Yes, of course there is. I always talk. How could I be so stupid? Thank you all. Thank you all very much. Good night.
guess that takes care of everyone.
No way. Nobody moves. Harry, you're captain. She's not here.
Oh, what a shame.
Yeah, I had a great time.
Me too. So I'll see you tomorrow. And, this. This was the most wonderful weekend I've ever had.
Now there goes a woman who never spent a weekend with Roy Biggins.
You mean she hasn't been chained to your furnace?
Hey, Joe. Helen's looking for you. She's out in the hangar with her Jeep.
What? What? Ellen, stop and think. You don't want to do this.
I'm not going to ram your office, Joe.
Sure. Get out. Step away from the vehicle.
There. Are you happy now?
Put the keys on the floor. Kick them over here.
I drove the Jeep in here just to show you I can live this far from your office and not want to drive through it.
The keys.
Joe, you don't understand. I went to this meeting tonight.
Ellen?
I've really been trying to control this anger that...
Ellen?
I'm not listening.
Thank you. Go ahead. You're making no progress with that anger thing.
I finally figured out why this has been so tough for me. Do you remember back in high school when Phil Stephan asked me to the spring dance? I was dreaming of going out with him, but figured he'd never ask me out because I was fat. Well, he finally did. And when we got to the dance, I overheard some of his buddies laughing and saying that Phil only asked me out to win a bet. Do you remember what happened then, Joe?
Yeah, you pretty much hoovered the dessert table.
After that,
I want you home tonight.
you sat with me on the front porch swing and let me cry on your shoulder. Don't you see, every time something rotten happened in my life, you were always there. I'd always run to you. And the problem was this time, the rotten thing that happened was you. And there was nowhere for my anger to turn.
You kind of parked at my office a couple of times.
See, this was so damn frustrating. It wasn't that I lost my boyfriend. I lost my best friend.
We're still your best friend. I'm going to tell you now what I told you on that porch swing. Any guy who would hurt a girl like you has got to be a real jerk. Two shoulders. No waiting.
Split ends. Gail should get a new conditioner.
Hey, you know, if you spend some time with her, you might actually hit it off.
Small steps, Joe, small steps. Well, I guess I should get this thing out of here.
Actually, I'd come up to back it out.
Joe, after the conversation we just had, you're worried.
I'm not worried. I just like to... Okay? Friend?
Suit yourself. Joe, be careful. Sometimes it's difficult shifting into... reverse.
Did you know gravity and relativity were discovered by people working from home? Do you know what I discovered? Kale. Curly, dinosaur, red Russian, ornamental. Instacart opens the world to all kinds.
I may go back to bed. Is that okay with you? I'm gonna upload this